Rachael, Classi of Tiny Earth. Welcome to the Motherly Podcast.
I'm so excited to be here.
So I always like to start by better understanding our guests' view of motherhood. So what I really want to know is what surprised you most about motherhood?
I feel like so much surprised me, but probably what surprised me the most was how unprepared I felt for motherhood in those early days. There was this gap in generational knowledge that I had in my family. I'd lost my mom when I was 8, and by the time I'd had my first daughter, I'd lost both of my grandmothers. And without that community of parents around me, I feel like I needed to become an academic researcher. I was the queen of late night Google searches. I think I owned every sleep sack imaginable, but, was just up at all hours feeling like I needed to really understand what I should be doing. And it really wasn't until I had my second daughter that I feel like I was more able to tap into the more intuitive side of motherhood and bring more of who I am, my values to the table in my parenthood. But yeah, I think we all have this view that like we're going to enter motherhood and it's going to be this intuitive, like we're these mama bears. And it really wasn't that for the first few years for me. I continued to feel just very unprepared, but I feel lucky now. I've got a community of neighbors and friends who have gone before me or are becoming mothers now. And I value them so much because they can help, check me and help me be a part of this community of moms and tap into that intuitive side of motherhood.
How did you make that shift from like parenting by the books, kind of feeling like you didn't have the sort of mentorship maybe that you needed or would have wanted ideally in your day-to-day life? How did you make that shift from kind of book knowledge motherhood to learning how to really trust that intuition?
I think going back to work after my first daughter, there wasn't time to do this level of research and second guessing of all of the things. There was just so much limited time to make a decision about, are we going to adopt a sleep schedule? How do we want to introduce baby-led weaning? And in a way, maybe that was a blessing. It forced me to just, instead of looking at what Google or a social media account had to say, just say, hey, what do I think is right? And maybe turn to my daughter a little bit more and observe her and be more present in the moment with her and with the family to say, hey, I think I got this. And if I don't, I'm going to learn pretty quickly that I don't have this. There's a great feedback loop there with your children. It's immediate. And I think that presence is something that we talk about a lot in my household, is how do we make each moment as present as possible and not always bring in the outside opinions and all of the ways that we might overwhelm ourselves.
You mentioned before we started the podcast that you had listened to an episode with the author of Mom Jeans, one of our podcast episodes, Abigail Tucker. And for me, one of the things that stood out was how much the first time mom brain changes. So it's interesting that, the second time was when you really were able to sink in to who you were in motherhood, right? Because I know now that how much the first time mother's brain is truly transforming. It's like a new kind of puberty, a second puberty happening within our bodies. So it's comforting to know that when you had your second child, that you had a comfort perhaps with what you were going through. Your brain probably wasn't changing as much, and you were able to kind of finally rest in what was maybe intuitive and built inside of you a bit more.
Yeah, it felt so liberating to hear that and learn that the first time mother's brain is just this new landscape, because it's so jarring. It's so jarring to have this identity crisis of, I know myself to be confident, intuitive, capable, and who am I if I am not all of these things or don't feel all of these things? So learning that felt really validating and comforting for me, certainly.
I totally agree. Well, we talked a bit about your own shift from 1 to 2, from book knowledge to intuition. You also recently made a shift professionally, and you talked a bit already about the corporate life you had before when you went back to work. You recently launched an incredible new company called Tiny Earth. Can you talk about where you were in your career and what made you want to launch this new mission-driven business?
Yeah, my husband and I were both working pretty intense jobs. I was working in a growth stage startup, and I was loving it. It was really intense. I was wearing a lot of different hats, and the pandemic hit. And I think for many families, we just were super overwhelmed. At the time, my daughters were 2.5 and 10 months old, and we just hit a breaking point. I feel really lucky. We were very lucky and fortunate to be able to make the decision to have me step away. I stepped away from my job to care for my daughters in the pandemic. And so I didn't leave feeling like I'm going to go start another company. I left feeling like, oh my gosh, how are we going to get through the next day, the next month? How long is this lasting? And in that time home, it was like I could see my family and my home with fresh eyes again. And what I saw alarmed me. There were things happening that I think in the busyness of our day-to-day life we'd let slip that weren't us. We had this, mountain of plastic toys that were missing parts or broken. And, on top of that, I found myself and my husband thinking about, like, how do we bring in toys for our kids' growing minds? Like, they're changing and growing so rapidly, and they're not in a school environment, and they're not getting that enrichment. So how might we create that environment here? And I think I just started to feel really overwhelmed by that and all the clutter in the house. And so I started a neighborhood toy exchange. There were a couple of families in my neighborhood who had young kids about the same age as my kids. And even though we were all freaked out about germs at that point, we were sanitizing toys and dropping them on each other's porches every couple of weeks to, help each other out. And it grew from there. I think that there was this shared feeling of anxiety about the clutter and all the stuff in homes, and also this need to have novel educational products that could be rotated in and out. And so later in 2020, we launched Tiny Earth Toys, and we now have families in almost every state in the country renting educational wooden toys and exchanging them every 2 months.
It's such a elegant, brilliant concept. I love it. So pitch me Tiny Earth Toys. What is this company you've built?
Yeah, Tiny Earth Toys, at its heart, we are on a mission to reduce plastic waste, but more importantly, to build a society of environmental stewards. We think we can include our kids in this environmental journey that we're all on. So how we do that is by promoting reuse, and particularly with children's toys, which are their first most loved objects. We rent curated kits by a team of early childhood educators who curate kits of toys for children from birth to 5 years. Families rent them on a subscription, and then they have access to exchange them from this massive library of toys from some of the best manufacturers in the world. We're really proud of the people who make these toys. And, the things that we get really excited about are seeing all of these toys stay in use for a really long time because they're such high quality wooden products.
That's such a great point. I know you also grew up out in the Mountain West and grew up loving the outdoors. And when you came back from that busy season of work into your home with fresh eyes, as you put it, like, there was plastic everywhere, right? I mean, so many of us are intentional about the products that we buy as adults, but then all of a sudden kids enter our lives and everything, it seems like almost everything is made of plastic. And if you're not intentional, it starts to overrun every room in your house, which I have so been there. How did your love of nature and maybe memories of your childhood shape this point of view on sustainability in kids' toys in particular?
Yeah, as you mentioned, I grew up in Eastern Washington State, and after my mom had passed away, I moved in with my aunt and uncle, and they lived on a piece of land, like a big piece of land that butted up against public lands that had trails. And my aunt and uncle are incredibly adventurous outdoors people. We had a big garden. We fished throughout the year, and a lot of the meat we ate, my uncle hunted for. So I still feel to this day this feeling of symbiosis from those early years. It felt really impactful to me. Now it feels really impactful reflecting on that. But I also think my love for the outdoors, I find it as like this center of healing. And in my life, I feel like it's been the place that I've done a lot of deep healing and introspection. So, for me, every Mother's Day, I started a tradition about 15 years ago. I'd go for a really long hike on Mother's Day, and it was a chance for me to reflect on my own mother. And today, I take my daughters out, and we'll go on a hike together. And it's definitely a lot less reflective and a lot more like, don't put the stick in your mouth. But I think it's just been a place of a lot of healing, and a place that, beyond we share this earth, and it has to be healthy for us to survive. It can also give us so much more than that. It can be a place of healing. It can be a place of introspection and calm from the maddening world that we live in. And I think that's shaped the passion that I have for building this now. It makes me feel even more conviction that we have to do anything we can to preserve that space for our kids and our communities. And I think that feeling and belief is one that wakes me up every day on the hard days to keep at this and see how other ways we might make an impact.
What is it about, I want to say modern childhood, that almost makes this such an opportunity? Because I think, I think about how much consumption goes through our house. What is the opportunity here as parents to reset our relationship to stuff and the environment as we raise, hopefully, a more conscious generation of kids?
I see two pieces to the stuff question. One is the impact that it has on the environment. Overconsumption by affluent individuals is one of the leading causes of climate change. So the fact that we live in a society where, we buy a lot more than we have in generations past. We are a lot more disposable with what we purchase. It's having a really big impact on the environment. And so there's that piece, but there's this other really interesting piece about what that does to us individually when we have homes full of clutter. And I think every parent can relate to that overwhelming stress of it's the end of the day and your house is blown up. It needs to be put back together, and there's more stuff than you could possibly need that's accumulated over time. And that leads to really stressful feelings that I think we as parents feel, and our kids can feel it too. And so I think there's an opportunity there. There's an opportunity to look after ourselves and declutter and minimize what we have. And then the benefit is it's good for everybody. It's good for the environment. And so I see it as this chance to almost liberate ourselves from the stuff, and then in doing so have a significant impact on our society's consumption.
It also these kinds of toys that you're talking about are also they have educational benefits. And can you talk about the qualities of them? Because specifically, I'm curious about the materials themselves, the weight, the way they feel in your hand, the fact that they're Montessori inspired and what that means, the fact that they lead to open-ended play. What are the qualities that we should be looking for in toys that make them really rich, creative opportunities for our kids, as opposed to a piece of plastic junk that is going to make noise and frankly probably end up in a landfill?
Yeah, the things we have a set of criteria that we use, but it's been a journey to realize that there's actually a lot of really high quality products that are beautiful to look at. To your point, they have this weight and feel. They're solid wood. They are treated with water-based paints as opposed to more chemically harsh paints. And many times they're sealed with things like beeswax. So a lot of really natural ingredients, which are a lot safer to mouth if they're like my 2.5-year-old who's still everything is in the mouth, then, you feel a little bit better about that. But we look for that for a few reasons. One, we feel like it can be very, very safe. These products are regenerative, so they are not going to take thousands and thousands of years to break down. But more importantly, they're really durable. These products are things that can last generations, which is so important when we think about what we buy. The longer it can last, the more it can be used. But the types of toys that, there's a lot of research around the types of toys that lead to great, rich learning experiences for children. And so our toys are open-ended, and what that means is they can be used in a million different ways. They can be a block set that you can build a village out of. They can be used with a set of dolls to become a table. They can just be used to stack or sort. And so open-ended toys have this powerful way of unlocking children's creativity and focus and growing with them. A basic set of blocks can be used by a 1-year-old to practice stacking, and then by a 5-year-old to build complex structures. And so we focus a lot on sourcing open-ended toys that can be used in a variety of different ways, but are also still super fun for kids to play with.
I also love the idea of just getting a rotation in, because sometimes your kids just get tired of things. What toys are your kids really loving right now? I know they're 2.5 and 5. What are they loving?
Yeah, we just recently found this thing. It's called a weather watch. It's this board, and you hang it up on the wall. And there's all of these inputs, and it's a tool to help older children think about things like seasons or temperature. And it's got all of these different things that you can input on it. And so every day now, my 5-year-old, she opens the door, she walks outside, she tests some things out and comes back in and then adjusts the weather watch. That one I can see sticking around for a while, and I'm enjoying it too. I'm like, hey, what do I need to be dressed in, Donna? Give me the weather. But I think the staple in our house that has really never gone away are a set of puzzles. They're double-sided puzzles. They're these really cool wooden puzzles that fit together in a couple of different ways that both my 2.5-year-old and 5-year-old play with in these really rich ways. They take them apart and use them as animals, and then they'll build the puzzle out of it. Then they'll stack the puzzle. Those have been the ones in my house that are just sticky day in and day out.
Yeah, we all need something like that to keep our kids really engrossed. Okay, go to the other room and play with your puzzle, please. Mommy needs a few minutes. Well, you've talked about how your really environmentally nature-rich childhood shaped you and helped heal you. As someone who's working in a sustainable business and thinks a lot about the impact that we have as parents on raising an environmentally conscious child and family, what other ways are there for families to build that kind of awareness and sustainable practices into their day-to-day family life?
Yeah, we think about this a lot with our daughters, where it's not developmentally appropriate for us to necessarily talk about climate change and the catastrophe that could lead to. But what we've tried to do is just pick some really small things we can include them in that might build healthy habits later on. And these are simple things. These are, things related to keeping reusable bags on hand and, making almost a game out of who's got the reusable bags when we go to the grocery store. Donna gets to bring them this time and Lucia gets to bring them that time, the next time. And so I think the ways that we can include them in some of the habits that we know to be really healthy and great habits for the environment are some of the best ways that we can start to foster that intuitive nature for them. It's habit. It's, of course you would bring your reusable bags or shut the lights off or turn the water off when you're brushing your teeth. And so we think a lot about the ways that we can just make it seem really normal, some of these things that we do. While sometimes taking on new adventures together, we're going to try to compost this year. And I say that very hesitantly because I'm like, we don't need another new thing, but I think it will be really fun. I think in the morning, thinking about we cracked the eggshells, where are they going to go? It's just another way we can teach them a skill that hopefully later in life they might be able to use. And it doesn't have to be as big as composting. It can just be the basics. Saying out loud what it is you're doing. Oh, I'm turning off the lights right now, and I'm saving a little bit of energy, or I'm shutting off the water while I brush my teeth to save some water for the fishies, for my 2.5-year-old's benefit, can help them understand and then mimic some of those habits.
I love that idea. I used to do that a lot more actually when my first son was little, like, I remember they would say, narrate your day, tell them
yeah.
what you're doing. But somewhere along the way, I stopped doing that. But even my little guy, I think that's a great tip.
Yeah.
I'm also curious about clutter and the research about clutter. We actually have an article on Motherly about how just the research that it gives mothers in particular a lot of stress and anxiety, and it doesn't have to be this way, but it sometimes can feel really hard to get control of the clutter. Do you have ideas for how parents can, like, especially ones who might be listening and thinking, it's a mess in that room and it's a disaster in that room and this room's all blown up, as you said before. So what advice do you have, I guess, on things that they can do on a day-to-day basis, but then also if there's more of a macro approach to rethinking clutter and stuff within our homes as parents? Because it's a big pain point.
It certainly is. It's something that I think we all feel. It's like the undercurrent sometimes in our lives. And on the note about day to day, we've been talking a lot in our office lately about how important it is to just start small and set your expectations, set really, really realistic expectations about what it means to declutter. And what that can look like is on a day-to-day basis, just picking one space. And it could be as much as a drawer in your bathroom that you want to declutter. And you want to not just declutter at once, but you want to keep it that way. So it's kind of a loop. You start by removing the things that are no longer being used or no longer serving you in any way. And then it's the hard work day to day of not buying more things to fill it. And looking at one space holistically can be empowering, because I think you start to become aware of how your habits might be feeding the clutter in the home, or, just because it happens. That's how it happens. My bathroom was like my nightmare zone. It's where the kids bathe, like we shower in there. There's stuff everywhere. And at one point I counted all of the bottles that were on the shelf, and there were like 23 bottles on the shelf. I'm like, nobody needs these, right? And so the bathroom for me has been my space to say, I want to declutter this once. I want to do the deep clean, and I'm going to do that over, a couple hours. But I'm going to be the one who's responsible for maintaining this and ensuring that, if there's a free giveaway at a hotel, I'm not grabbing it if I don't need it. Or, I'm gonna ensure that I don't need 3 different deodorants. If they're not working for me, I'm going to pick one of them. And so I think sometimes starting in a smaller way and owning that and living with that one decluttered zone for a while can really give you the encouragement. It gives me the encouragement to say, okay, I don't want to take on the kitchen, but I know I need to at some point, and I'm going to build up some confidence with this one space. And playrooms are certainly a really great place to start too, because you can involve your children in it, and it can also be something.
Talk to us about involving your children.
Yeah,
it's funny you say that. I have to do this. We have 42 little plastic, half-used, the sets don't work.
Yes,
toys, and I was thinking, like, they're not even playing with any of them. And so I know that we have to do a reset, but I also know I want to include my children in that process. So what advice do you have for including your children in purging, organizing, sorting, donating, those kinds of things that are not serving us?
Yeah, certainly for younger kids, that's tough, right? They think they need everything. And I swear the times it's so hard. You want to include them, and yet at the same time, they can slow it down a little bit. So the big purge, we did the big purge of like the baby stuff without them. Yep. We did that during a time where they were napping or asleep for the night. And we said, okay, the baby stuff that we know we don't need in this home, we're going to do that. We're going to take that on. But where we've started to involve them, now that the play spaces feel a little more manageable in our home, we've started with rotations. And for us, that means, hey, what on the shelf are you not playing with? Or what in this room do we want to go get some new stuff to rotate into this room? And so toy rotations for us have been huge, and they get excited about those. But I think the reset for us at the age and stage was important to do without them present. Yeah. Those concepts were tricky and tough. Now I feel like there's a lot of excitement that they get around, hey, you know what, we keep 10 to 12 toys in this one room. And after a couple of weeks, when they've gotten stale, they get excited about putting them away. putting them in a basket, bringing them up to the closet, and then picking out some other toys to come back down into the rotation. And in doing so, I think they're keeping their spaces cleaner. They're not as overwhelmed by how many toys are in the room that can lead to a lack of focus. And they get excited to get new, fresh stuff in when they've kind of become bored or the novelty is worn off a little bit.
The idea of rotating toys in at different times and with a lot of intention, it actually reminds me a lot of Montessori, and my kids at various points have gone to different Montessori schools. What is it about the Montessori approach that's really resonated with you, both as a mom and as a business owner?
Yeah, the first person I brought into Tiny Earth Toys to talk about this concept is a woman named Olinda Smith. She's an early childhood educator. She's been a Montessori teacher and school operator for 15 plus years. And I'd sent my daughters to a Reggio Emilia school, which is a really similar methodology to Montessori. And I saw a lot of empowerment that they felt. I felt like this idea of raising an independent child was one that was really exciting and attractive to me, that they were learning skills that they would take later into their life, and that the education was so intentional around developing this independent thinking and a lot of the play-based learning that they were doing. And so I've been really shaped by the experiences that my daughters have had, and also by the team of early childhood educators with backgrounds in Montessori education have had in helping me understand the philosophy behind both very intentional toy selection as well as, in the environment, how you set your environment. The Montessori classroom, when you walk into one, it can feel very different from what we're used to seeing of a quote unquote classroom, but it's been very intentionally created to foster these moments of learning for children and discovery for them. And that really resonates with me. And I think that idea of an intentional environment is kind of, it's how I feel about Tiny Earth Toys and how we can create that in our own homes. And so I think seeing that in the Montessori classroom just really resonates for me when I think about learning and environments where my kids could thrive.
I also want to talk about this career change. You touched on it at the beginning, but you left your job. You were able to.
Yes.
During that time, not everyone was able to, but many, many women, especially mothers, some say were pushed out of the workforce by the conditions of the pandemic. And I think are just beginning in many cases to explore, like, what does this mean for my career? How did what happened shape what I want to build going forward? What advice do you have to the listeners who are kind of doing that work? Because, I mean, in 2 years, you left your job, had a pandemic, and also launched a new company. But, for other people, that timeline is just beginning. So it's really helpful to hear from someone who's really pivoted and reevaluated the impact that you're having through your career. What advice do you have for other mothers in that situation?
Yeah, I think that examination of what it meant to be a professional prior to COVID it's a moment of examination for a lot of women. This idea of, hey, the way my professional path may have been looking in the past might not work in the future. We're continuing to be in a place of a lot of uncertainty, and with young children at home, it's really forced us to prioritize. And so what I would say has been important for myself in undergoing this shift is being a lot clearer about, in this moment in time that we're in today, with the level of uncertainty we have, what are the things that must be true for me in order to take care of my family in a way that is of the utmost importance, but also create opportunities to develop professionally. And I've noticed that a lot of companies and a lot of individuals who are starting contracting businesses or side hustles, there is some increasing flexibility and some ways that we might be able to find the type of balance that we need in order to be present in both our careers and at home. And I think that's going to increasingly be important as a society, that we make those opportunities, that we find those opportunities and that we integrate them into our lives. And I think it is a really big responsibility on businesses right now to find a way to make that on-ramp back into the job market smoother for moms. It's really tricky right now, particularly with school closures and, sicknesses ongoing. How are we making this tenable and possible? So I see a lot of responsibility for businesses. I know that's not the best advice for moms, but the one piece of advice I got given when I started this company, which felt really scary at the time, and this is the advice that I think has been the best advice I've been given, is find yourself a cheerleader and find yourself a sounding board. And those might be two different people. The cheerleader is the person who's going to pick you up. You might have applied to 10 jobs, or you haven't found something that's going to work with the hours that you need. And it's very easy to get beaten down. And your cheerleader is the friend or family member who's going to pump you up, get you so energized to go do it again tomorrow. And your sounding board is the person who can help you identify your blind spots. And they might not always, be soft about it, but find someone who can be direct and give you the feedback that you need to get you able to see those blind spots that are probably some of the more important things to you being really successful in what you're doing. And I've got those people, and I've got to remind myself to call the sounding board, because sometimes it can hurt when you talk to them. But surrounding yourself with that tribe can be really transformational, because it's tough. It's tough figuring out what comes next after a transition like that.
And it's so interesting because you actually started this company out of what sounds like a need, noticing that you're in your home, you've got all this plastic junk, you want to have more enriching toys for your own kids. You started this neighborhood toy swap. At what point did you realize, wait a minute, this isn't a neighborhood toy swap, this is this new company that I'm going to launch?
Yeah, I tried to give the idea away for a little while. It wasn't something I said,
someone should start this.
Yes. And I was like, maybe one of the toy companies will do this. I'll email them all. It felt like something that there was such an obvious need for this. And it wasn't until I had some people in the neighborhood toy exchange who said, hey, I'll give you some money to buy new toys so that we have some fresh stuff in the mix. And I thought, yeah, why wouldn't we just do that if that's how it would work? So I used some money from my savings, and we launched a pilot with 15 families in different states. Some people I knew, some people I didn't. We built a wait list up and just wanted to see if this was truly something that outside of my neighborhood people needed, or were feeling that same feeling of, hey, I want to get rid of the clutter, but I also want to have enriching materials in my home. And we enrolled our paid pilot in one day, and that gave us a lot of confidence to say, okay, there is more to be done here. And it gave me a lot of confidence to say, I don't want to give this idea away. It's really at the intersection of everything I'm passionate about. I want to be the one to solve this problem.
I love that. And I love for our listeners who are trying to figure out what comes next for them, that, this incredible business grew out of a pain point you experienced in your everyday as a mother. And there are so many, I know, thousands, millions of small businesses, big businesses that are yet to be built, because as mothers, we're in the thick of it. We are in the thick of school life and career life, family life. There are so many challenges that we have, and the fact that you built this company out of something that so many of us encounter every day, then you tested it small, then you realize, wait, there's something really here. I think that's just a really inspiring roadmap to others who are trying to imagine, what does my career become? What do my passions become? And how do I do that in the midst of motherhood? And yet you're able to show you do it sort of through motherhood, the struggles that we all experience in common. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you.
You've talked about your mother a few times and that you lost her when you were 8 years old. Can you tell us more about her?
Yeah, she's kind of continues to be my inspiration for so many things. And I feel like even though the window of time where we were together was young, very, very short, it has been the most impressionable relationship I've had. And what I remember of her was just her initiative and her kind of biased towards action in really positive ways. She was really involved with people around her. She wanted to be involved with our schools, her community, her family, and she did it in a really gentle way. And I think I continue to feel, in a lot of what I reflect when I am thinking about her, is how much she did in her life. She did so gracefully and with so much love in her heart. And I lost her really unexpectedly. She died in her sleep of heart failure, and there was nothing leading up to that moment that would have indicated that that could have happened. And yet, as we know, things can happen. And it's certainly an area of deep healing I've had to have in my life, but one that I think the lens of motherhood today has been probably the biggest agent for healing. You know, becoming a mom and wondering about the experiences that I'm having with my girls, and thinking, I wonder if my mom felt this way about holding me at night, putting me to bed, the stories she would tell me. And I find myself now repeating a lot of those stories or singing a lot of those songs to my girls as a chance to talk about her and remember her.
What do you tell your daughters about your mother?
You know, death is such a tricky one, and I think this pandemic has been so hard for families because we've had to face conversations with our children that we weren't prepared to face. And so I know a lot of families maybe have had to deal with this, and so I'm really open with them. We talk about death in my household. We talk about the fact that my mom died, and she died when I was little. And I think that could scare a child to say, oh my gosh, are you going to go? So that's generally followed with, you know, I don't have any plans of leaving anytime soon. But I try to talk about her proactively. They don't think to bring her up, but I try to talk about her as much as I can. You know, I remind them their hair looks a lot like my mom's, and I'll tell them, your hair is just like grandma's hair. And they say, which grandma? And I say, you know, my mommy Julie's hair. And they say, oh yeah, your mom Julie's hair. And so we really try to keep her alive and others in our family alive that have passed in ways that we can in our home. We think that's helpful. It's helpful for them so they know more about their history, but it's helpful for us to keep them and their spirit out in the open and not just inside our heads, you know, like the grief that you might live with that's inside you. Having it out there together feels a little less heavy.
Mm-hmm. Are there any specific traditions or one tradition, either that she taught you or you find really helps connect your family, your children, and you back to your mother?
The thing I think about when I think about my mom the most was how adventurous she would approach. So it's a little more of like a theme than a specific thing, but everything felt like an adventure. We had this big park near where we lived. It's called Manitou Park in Spokane. It's just massive, and it's got all of these gardens. And I just remember her picking us up from school, and we would go there, and there'd be these like crazy adventures she would create. Like there was this ship structure, and we would be on it, and she'd be the shark, and you know, and then we'd transition from that into a scavenger hunt in the woods, and it just everything kind of felt very adventurous. And I want that kind of excitement and adventure to be a part of my kid's life. I'd say it's that, and also nighttime, our routines at night. I remember laying in bed with my mom and her reading to us, and, you know, holding our hands and touching our faces as we were going to bed to help us sleep, and singing "You Are My Sunshine." And so we do that at night. And that feels like a really beautiful circle to me now. When my kids at night will ask for that song, they'll say, will you sing "You Are My Sunshine"? Or they'll start singing it to me. It just feels like this beautiful circle of life, or like a very cheesy term, you know, Lion King, thank you. But it does feel like that, you know?
Mm-hmm. How do you think that losing your mother shaped you? And, you know, can you even put words to the imprint that it left you, especially so young and unexpectedly?
I think the thing that it's impacted me in the most is my independence. And I had a wonderful family around me who made me feel loved and were there for me and cared for me. But I think I grew up really quickly and I became very independent in many ways. And if you in middle school or high school, I feel like I was taking care of a lot of things for myself that, in my adulthood even, I feel this kind of almost extreme independence in my life that, now becoming a part of my own nuclear family, you have to relearn a little bit, but it forced me into some independence that I don't think I would have had she not passed away. And I see that as a good and bad thing. In some ways I'm more in the fact that I feel like I grew up a lot quicker. And in other ways I'm really grateful because it's led me to really look out for myself and take a lot of initiative in my life, whether that's, writing my college applications myself and, really charting my own path in life in a way that, I took charge of and hold of. But, and so I think a lot about my own kids. I want them to have some of that independence. And maybe that's why I'm so drawn to some of Montessori's teachings around that is I really want them to feel capable and independent and have me, and have their mother there looking over them, supporting them, being there for the things that they're going to need. So it's really that idea of just being a lot more independent than I think I would have been. I think I would have been just, my mom's little girl. She was such a loving and affectionate mom.
You talked about your mom's spirit of adventure and playfulness and making everything really an adventure. I'm curious if you see starting a new company, launching a startup of your own as that kind of adventure.
Yeah, I think that's really insightful. I appreciate that insight. I do see it that way, and I think that my kids being a part of it too makes it really special that they come into the office and they think it's so cool that I work at this toy company.
Yeah.
They think that I make the toys or something, I think, but having them be a part of it and come help unpack when we've got a big delivery that's come in, is a really big adventure for them. And it's one that I hope to continue to foster. Having them a part of what we're doing can feel like a lot of fun and they're certainly the inspiration for what I'm doing. And I hope that they can continue to feel a part of that.
My parents actually had a catalog business when I was growing up.
Oh my gosh.
And
wow.
So it was right before the internet exploded. And I literally used to answer the phone and take orders, and they'd be like, is this a 9-year-old? And I was like, yes. And this is the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. I used to fill orders in their warehouse, and it was so fun. It just was so fun to be a part. And that's so Montessori, actually, to be a part of the so-called adult world, but to include your children and as little apprentices in what you're building. It meant a lot to me. It's some of my favorite memories of growing up. So I'm sure it will mean a lot to your daughters.
That.
For sure.
Yes. Oh, that's wonderful.
Yep. I'm bringing back, it was the real cold warehouse and all of that, but still it was definitely an awesome adventure. We'll never forget. Okay. So at Motherly, we believe that motherhood brings out our superpowers, and those are forces, powers, talents, things within us sometimes that feel larger than life, and they're often things that we didn't know was in there until we became a mom. So I'm curious, what is your superpower?
I think we all share a superpower of operating without sleep. I've had this idea for the new Marvel, a new Marvel movie for a while. And it's instead of Wonder Woman, it's the amazing Wonder Sleepless Woman, all the things we can do, but not my real superpower. I think it's been initiative. I don't think anything has forced me to self-reflect on the woman that I want to be or the person I want to be more than becoming a mom. And And in doing that, I feel this need to act, this need to act to become a better version of myself for them and for myself. And I don't think I felt that as deeply before having kids. They have made me reevaluate a lot of things about myself and about who I want to be. And I think that that's so empowering. And it's something that, I find myself taking initiative on things that I want to improve in myself or in the world around me in a way that I never would have before. It feels like you have to, you have to for yourself and for them. And I personally have started to love that more about myself. I've had to also figure out how you do that without overcommitting to all of the things that you want to do that you cannot do all of. But certainly that feeling of initiative and that willingness to act when it matters has changed a lot through motherhood.
So important, so relatable too. Rachael, Classi of Tiny Earth, thank you so much for joining us on the Motherly Podcast.
Thanks, Liz. It was such a pleasure.